3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you're just joining us for the first time today, February is always a great month here. For the last 10 years, we use February as a time to showcase incredible women in science, exploration, conservation, and adventure from all over the world. And the reason we pick February is because today, February 11th, is the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So if you visit exploringbytheseat.com, you will find a ton of live lessons that you can join in all month long. I think we've got 40 or so live lessons by the time the month comes to an end. So it's only week 2. It's Tuesday. There is a lot more action to come. So today, with it being the big day, we thought it would be fun to team up with the World Wildlife Fund, both in Canada and the US, to showcase some of their amazing researchers, conservationists, and scientists, to give them a chance to share the cool work they're doing, and to give you guys a chance to ask some questions. So it's been a busy day. We've already had 5 live events with WWF, and this is our final one for today, but I think it's going to be a good one. So joining us now will be Sam Cheng, Conservation Evidence Director for WWF-US. She's going to share all the ways we use science to help us understand how conservation projects are helping the planet. So sharing stories about how we use different types of scientific observation and collaboration to better understand the mysterious lives of cephalopods. Some of you might know right away examples of cephalopods. Some of you might be wondering, what in the world are those? I think we might find out today. So I'm going to grab Sam from backstage. Here we go. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Sam, it's great to have you live with us today. It has been a jam-packed day. We've got classrooms backstage waiting to get a chance to meet you and ask some questions. We've got classrooms tuning in via YouTube. They can use the chat sidebar to send in some questions anytime throughout today's event. But it's time. It's time to let you take over for a little bit before we get into that Q&A action.
All right. Well, great to be here. Thanks again, Joe. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can get started learning about all the different ways that we use science to understand some really mysterious creatures called cephalopods. Okay, let me get us going. All right. So I am speaking to you today from Portland, Oregon. If anyone here is calling in from Portland or from Oregon or the Pacific Northwest, let me know. Great to hear from you. And I'm really excited because this is something that I have been working on for a long time about how do we use science in ways that are really practical and help us understand how the world is working and how we can best design conservation so it helps people and nature in the long term. So as Joe said, I work at the World Wildlife Fund. I am the Director for Conservation Evidence, but I obviously didn't always used to be. So there I am on the right, in kindergarten, in a town called Brookline, in Boston, in Massachusetts. At the age of 5, wearing all sorts of fun things with my giant glasses. And I don't know about you all, but when you were in kindergarten, and probably right now, whether you're a kid or an adult, we think about what we want to be when we grow up. And we talked about this a lot. And I wanted to be a lot of different things. For a long time, at least for a long time for someone who's 5, I wanted to be a waitress. So I practiced a lot of balancing skills of plates and bowls and cups. And I probably should keep practicing balancing those things. I wasn't very good at it. But when I was 5, I also started figure skating. And I had dreams of being Chrissy Yamaguchi. And if you don't know who she is an amazing figure skater who skated for Team USA in the 1992 Olympics and won the gold medal. And I love skating. I wanted to do all of those things. I wanted to win the gold medal. But then when I was 7, my family went on a trip to Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. And at the aquarium, I was totally mesmerized. Like, figure skating, what is that? I don't even know. I saw all these schools of sardines swimming around and turtles coming in and out, rays that were gliding around, and giant tunas that were just coming out of the gloom. And I was totally hooked. And when it was time to leave, everything had changed. I knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. It wasn't waitressing. It wasn't figure skating. It was to live in this aquarium tank. Now, you might be thinking, that seems a bit silly. And yes, that didn't happen. I am not speaking to you from an aquarium tank right now. But that tank really set me on a journey of asking a lot of questions, like, why can't I live in that tank? But also questions like, how do all these animals live together in this tank without eating each other? Does that happen in the ocean? How does that change? What if there were more sharks or less sharks? More tuna, less tuna? What would happen? How would things change? And today, I am still asking all of those questions and more. And in fact, it actually is my job to ask a lot of questions and to help answer them about nature, about people, and about conservation. So at WWF, I work with our teams around the world to understand how nature is changing. What kind of things can we be doing that best help nature, that help people in different places, in rainforests, in cities, in deserts, in the ocean? And are the things that we're doing for conservation working? How can we improve the way that we protect species, that we manage, the way we grow food, the way we eat food? And how do we actually answer these questions, though? Well, we use evidence. You might be wondering, okay, what is evidence? So if we take it very, very simply, it's a collection of facts that help us understand what is true. So let's imagine this example right now, and maybe this is true where you are. There is a plate of cookies, but there is a cookie missing. How do you know what happened to the cookie? Would you believe it if someone came along and said, oh, your teacher got really hungry and ate one before you came in? Would you believe it if someone came by and they're like, oh, actually, my cat ate it? Or if someone else came by and they're like, well, actually, aliens came down from space and took a cookie and then they just beamed out. You might say, well, what's the proof of these things happening? You might look around and see what kind of pieces of information can I observe from this area to figure it out. Are there crumbs on the floor? Are there crumbs on someone's shirt? Is someone wiping their hands or their paws or their alien tentacles? Or you might think, well, an hour ago, who was saying they were really hungry? Or maybe thinking, who do I know here who has said they would never eat a cookie because they hate them? So in conservation, we also try and bring together evidence from lots of different places, whether there are questions about or our knowledge of what we know or what we can see. And we bring together things like observations, scientific research, and our knowledge and experience all together to help us answer questions about how conservation works and what's happening in nature. The same way we started thinking about that to figure out what happened to that cookie. So for the rest of our time together, I'm going to talk about how I work to gather evidence to answer questions about some of the most mysterious animals in the ocean. Cephalopods. So what are cephalopods? These animals are a type of mollusk. Other types of mollusks are snails and slugs, clams, and oysters. And the name cephalopod actually comes from Greek, where ceph means head and pod means foot, because the head of these animals is directly attached to their feet, or in this case, their arms. So I know you're all coming in from different parts of the world and you have the chat in front of you. So, a question for all of you. Can you name a type of cephalopod? Just type it there into the chat. And I'll give you all a few seconds there while I tell you more. So, cephalopods are really old. They evolved over 500 million years ago. And today there are over 700 different types of cephalopods. And half of those are a type of cephalopod that I study, which are the squid. And some of you, I'm sure, put squid first because they are, in fact, the best. But maybe some of you also put octopuses or cuttlefish or nautilus that you also see here on the screen. So one of the things that are probably best known about cephalopods is their ability to change their appearance through the use of these special cells they have in their skin. And these cells on their skin, they open and close, and they show different layers of reflective or colored tissue, depending on what the animal wants to do. So for example, as you see here, the squid are flashing different patterns on their skin, indicating they're trying to say something to each other. They might be ready to mate. And cephalopods also use this kind of behavior to camouflage themselves, to hide from predators or to sneak up on prey. And in some cases, for cuttlefish, actually hypnotize their prey to better capture them. So cephalopods and squid are really important in the ecosystem. They are right in the middle of the food web, meaning they eat lots of things and a lot of things eat them. So if the number of squid in the ocean were to change, either get really big or really small, this would really change how those different animals interact with each other. And it might mean that some animals have a lot to eat and some don't have a lot to eat. So not only are cephalopods really important for the ecosystem, but they're also really important for people. And since ancient history, people have been mesmerized by these animals. They painted them on pottery. They describe them in different legends, like the story of the kraken in the sea that eats ships. And today, we still love cephalopods. They inspire us in so many different ways. So, for example, have you noticed that when you watch movies about aliens, they kind of look like octopus or squid a lot of the time? So, can you think of what else cephalopods have shown up in? We can put it in the chat. And of course, we also love cephalopods as food, like fried calamari here. So squid are really important for the ecosystem and for people. And around the world, people fish for squid, especially in New England, where I grew up, and on the West Coast, where I now live, as well as many other places around the world. So it's really important that we understand how we can fish squid in a way that ecosystems remain healthy and people can continue to fish them over time for their jobs, for the food we eat, and for the culture of our places. So I started researching squid over 15 years ago. And I discovered that one of the things we really needed to know was which squid are we even fishing? Which ones are being caught? Where do they live? And how are they affected by fishing? So to get some inklings about how we can conserve squid, I worked on this squid here, the big fin reef squid. It lives all around the world, in the Pacific, the Indian Oceans, and the Mediterranean Sea, and it's been fished for hundreds of years. But we were starting to find out that there was actually more than one species, meaning that if there's more than one species, they're going to be different in how long they live, where they live, what they eat. And so we might need to fish them in different ways to make sure that they can remain in the ecosystem over time. And so working with people all around the world, we started to gather evidence to help answer these questions. Now, remember what I said earlier about wanting to live in an aquarium tank? Turns out I don't have gills still, and tracking them underwater can be quite hard. So how do we actually figure out what they're doing if we can't be underwater diving and watching them all the time? And so what we do is we bring together a bunch of different ways to gather observations about squid, conduct research about them, and bring knowledge in from different people and different sources. So the first thing we can do is figure out, well, what do we already know? So we talked to the people who already know a lot. So in Indonesia, where I'd worked for a long time, we would go to the fish market and we would talk to the ladies who'd been fishing and selling squid all of their lives because they knew how the squid had been changing, where they might be living around the area, and how they were fished. And then after those early mornings at the fish market, we would then head out and go to the reef, go to the shore, and start to look for where squid might be living in their natural habitat. And so here in this photo, I'm standing with some researchers from Japan and Taiwan on an expedition to figure out where squid lay their eggs so we can understand what kind of habitats are most important for them. We would snorkel and we would look for these egg masses. And these egg masses in each one of these little fingers are hundreds of little egg embryos that will hatch out and turn into baby squid. And these areas are really important because they're called nursery habitats. They're safe, they're protected, and they allow these eggs to grow so that those babies, the baby squid can survive. And so we would map where these are so we would know which areas should be protected from human activities. And we would also make observations by diving and filming their behavior so we could see what they were actually doing on the reefs, what part of the reefs were they using, where were they hunting. And we would also leave cameras out to film them undisturbed for longer periods of time than we actually be there diving. We would also take measurements with squids, of squids, so we know how they might be different from each other and maybe how they grow in different ways. So are some squid bigger? Are some smaller? And one thing that we figured out in looking at squid in all these different ways is even though we knew there were lots of different species, it was still hard to tell them apart. It wasn't like one squid is green and one squid is blue. They were all quite mixed. And so you can imagine that trying to figure out how many of each species were fished and where they're fished was really hard. And so we brought in another type of evidence, DNA evidence. And so what is DNA? DNA is a material that's in the cells of all living things. And what's really cool about it is it's unique to each one of us and to each individual squid. And it contains a unique fingerprint that tells us about different species. It also contains instructions on how animals and humans develop and function. And we can also study it to understand the history of how different animals and humans actually evolved. And so we use DNA to help us determine how many different types of squid species exist. And to do that, we extracted that DNA from squid tissues that we collected from the fish market, from diving, and from eggs, and looked at the pattern of the DNA in the lab to see how different they were from each other. And as you can see, sometimes it's really hard to see what you're pipetting into your pipette. So all of this evidence, observations of where they live, where they lay their eggs, how many species are there, and how they're really different from each other, helped us, scientists working with governments, working with fishers, to better keep track of which ones were fishing, how many of them were fishing, and what areas we shouldn't be fishing in, and when we shouldn't be fishing them, so we could make sure that squid populations and the ecosystems where they're living are healthy, and so that people like you and me can continue to enjoy them for a long time. So what can you do to help conservation? You can start by asking questions and making observations. Look around you. What do you see in nature? How is it changing? Ask why is it changing? Ask how is it changing? And most importantly, ask how do we know that? What else do we need to know to understand this? So evidence is really important in how we do our conservation work, but also how we understand the world around us, because it helps us figure out what's true, what might be false, and what else we need to know so we can better understand how to protect nature and people. And with that, I'm going to turn it to all of you so that you can start asking me lots and lots of questions.
All right. There you are. Sam, thank you for that great presentation. As a scuba diver myself, it's always a great time to be in the water with a squid or an octopus. So yeah, pretty cool that you get to go out into the field, but also you can do some of that evidence collecting in places like Marcus as well. Yeah, very cool. Well, what we're going to do, I can see lots of questions already coming into the chat, which is great, but we're going to play our Kahoot first. So in a moment, I'm going to share my screen, and then we are going to get that going. So many ways you can join the Kahoot. Once the screen shares, you will have a chance to join us. Here we go. Perfect. It should come up now. So you need to go to kahoot.it, kahoot.it. Once you get there, it's going to ask you for a PIN number. The PIN is 964-1855. So you have your teacher could pop this up at the front of the classroom. You could shout out your answers to him or her. If you're at home, you could use a phone or a tablet to scan the QR code. If you just can't join with technology, no big deal. You can still play along and see how you do. But I see that we have lots of groups joining us, so that's great. While we wait for it to slow down, I've got tons of questions coming in via the chat, so I'm going to work in a few of those. So, okay, so Miss Rivera's class, they are joining us from Illinois, and they're curious about, can you talk a little bit more about some of the ways squids can help the environment?
Yeah, that is a great question. And so I mentioned at some point that squid are in the middle of the food web, meaning squid are really important as a prey species for animals like whales and tunas and other large fish, but they also eat a lot of things. And so if we don't have squid in the ecosystem, it can disturb that whole balance. And so what we're seeing in some places as squid populations get bigger or smaller, it's actually changing how that whole ecosystem works. So making sure that we conserve them and we manage them really well is really important if we want healthy oceans.
Okay. A few classrooms have brought up giant squid.
Always.
Yeah. Obviously something they're very curious about. So I'll pick Miss Rockwood's crew here with their question. Do you know roughly how big they can get? And they've also heard that there's a strong ammonia smell associated with them. Can you shed some light on that?
I can definitely tell you that they do smell. And I can tell you that from firsthand experience. When I was working in Santa Cruz, in California, we got a call at the fisheries research station that a giant squid had washed up on shore, and they didn't know what to do with it. And so it ended up in our garage, not my whole house garage, in the research garage. And they laid it out, and that one was at least maybe 30 feet long. And that was a small one. So they can grow to be quite large. And I can't tell you the precise length right now because I don't want to get it wrong. But I'm guessing between 50 to 60 feet. Really depends on where they live, and they smell. And the reason why they smell is because they live really deep, and they're used to living really deep. And when they come up to the surface where we are, that change in pressure is huge. And so their insides don't really survive that process. And that's where some of that smell comes from, is some of the liquids in them.
All right. Well, I think we will get into the Kahoot. Then we'll bring in some camera classrooms. We'll take more YouTube questions. Let's get this started. 4 questions, true or false, multiple choice. If you are paying attention, it should be pretty easy for you. The quicker you put in the right answer, the more points you're going to get. So, warming us up. Growing up, Sam wanted to be a doctor, a figure skater, a chef, or a lawyer. And we've got a clue decoding there for you. But remember, the quicker you get the answer in, the more points you're going to get. All right, couple more seconds. All right, good job, crew. I know waitress was mentioned as well, but I decided to go figure skater because it looked cool. Well, the picture decoded. Okay, Captain Swan is in first place. Let's go to the next question. True or false? Evidence is collecting facts to see what's true. What do you think? Is that true or false? Evidence is collecting facts to see what's true. You've got about 11 seconds to lock in an answer. All that clicking means answers are coming in, which is great. All right. Good job, crew. Absolutely true. Captain Swan, holding on. Here we go. Another multiple choice. About how many species of cephalopods are there? Was it 50-ish, 250, 400, or around 700? So about how many species of cephalopods are there? Around 50, 250, 400, or 700? Got about 5 more seconds to lock it in. All right. Good job, crew. A little bit of a spread. It kind of built upwards, but 700, roughly 700. And it wouldn't surprise me, Sam, if there might be some more to be added in the future. It's a big ocean. Okay. One more question to go. Ooh, Royal Goat sneaking in. Here we go. True or false? We need to find a healthy balance with how much squid we fish. Is that true or is that false? We need to find a healthy balance with how much squid we fish. Now that I'm thinking about this, I did this really fast, and now I'm worried I might have hit the wrong button, but we'll see. Oh, good, I did. I did the right button. Excellent. Absolutely true. We do need to find that healthy balance. They're important to us, right? We are part of our diet, but they play really important roles in the ecosystem, so we need them there. Okay, here we go. In third place, we've got the Dr. Mouse.
Woo!
Second place, Yellow Camel. And holding down that top spot, the Royal Goat.
Wow.
Questions. All right. Let's come back from that screen share. Thanks, everyone, for playing with us today. And we've got lots of questions here, so let's get right into them. Let's start with Madame Green's crew. I'm going to bring them up on the screen. They are in, I think they're in, British Columbia. How we doing, Madame Green's crew? There they are.
Okay, Zach, you have a question?
How long can big fin squids live?
How long can big fin squid?
Yeah.
Live?
No. How long can?
Oh, the length.
How long can they be? Oh, great question. And this is one of those things we were trying to figure out, because some of them were actually really small, like the size of my hand, like 6 inches. I can't convert to metric. I'm sorry. I'm a bad conversion scientist. But some other ones could grow to like 5 feet. And so if I were to stand up, that would just be like 4 inches below my height. So they can be quite large.
All right. Do we have another one there before we jump to another group?
Say it louder, please.
How long can squid live for?
How long can squid live?
For a lot of different periods of time. Some squid live for very short, like 6 months. There's a squid here on the West Coast. Then maybe they even make up to British Columbia, called the opalescent squid. And you might eat a lot of them. And they only live 6 months. Maybe if it's cold, they'll live for 8 months. But squid, like the giant squid, can live for decades.
All right. Thanks, Madame Green's crew. Great questions. We'll see if we can swing back before the end. We've got lots of classrooms with lots of questions. So Cherry Tree class, they are backstage, but the mic isn't connected, but they sent me some questions in the chat. First, they love your research, and they are going to Monterey Bay Aquarium Tuesday, so they're pretty excited. And they would like to know if you've seen My Octopus Teacher, and if, what's your favorite sea creature, if it isn't the squid.
Okay, I'm going to start with my favorite sea creature. I actually think my favorite sea creature is something called a nudibranch. It's also a mollusk. It's a kind of sea slug, but they're really colorful. They're really small, and they have all these appendages hanging off of them. So really neat. And don't tell the squid I said that. And then have I seen the movie My Octopus Teacher? Yes, I have. It was a great movie. I definitely cried a little bit during it. And if you haven't seen it, I would suggest it. It's a great way to learn more about how octopus communicate and all the cool things they do in the environment.
All right. We've got some fourth graders joining us from British Columbia. How are we doing, fourth graders? All right. Grab that mic for us, and then we want a question.
Thank you. So yeah, Keegan
I got a
here
question
has a
for you.
question. Go ahead.
How big can squid brains get?
Squid brain.
Squid brains.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that's a good question. I want to think about that. So if you can imagine that the biggest squid, the giant squid, can grow between 40 and 60 feet long, let's say, and their head is just going to be about 10% of that length. There's some math that has to happen in my head here that I'm not doing very well, but I would guess it can be anywhere from the size of like a pea for the smallest squid, maybe even smaller, to maybe the size of a grapefruit for the biggest squid.
Thanks.
Yeah.
who else has a
Right.
question?
You want to squeeze one more in?
Okay, Pearl.
How is salmon important?
Salmon are really important. Yes. Salmon are a really, and of course you're calling them from British Columbia, and I'm just a little bit south of you in Oregon, and salmon are everywhere. They're a big part of the ecosystem. We eat a lot of salmon. A lot of people fish salmon, but salmon also eat squid. So squid and salmon are equally important for each other.
All right. Thanks, grade fours. We'll see
Thank
if we
you
can.
so much.
Yeah,
I
we'll
like
see
your
if we
new
can
maps.
swing by at the end for one more. Okay, we've got a homeschool group hanging out with us, Emily and Elijah. There they are.
What's the most dangerous moment you had with a cephalopod?
Oh, a dangerous moment. I don't know if it was that dangerous, but one time an octopus stole my little set of clippers that I was using to collect samples. It was probably because I left my bag a little bit close to its den and I wasn't paying attention. And this is something to remember for all of you. When you're in the ocean, you should always pay attention because you never know what might happen. And in this case, the octopus was interested, and I just reached in, grabbed my little set of clippers, and pulled them into its hole. And I didn't notice until I saw him stick out. When I tried to grab him, it grabbed back. Luckily, in the end, we came to an agreement, and I got them back, and everyone was okay.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. That was a great question. I had something similar, but it was my GoPro when I was in the Azores. There's lots of octopus all around Tessera, and I almost lost my GoPro to a very strong cephalopod who thought, you know what, this thing's pretty cool. I think I would like.
I'll keep this now.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to visit another camera classroom in just a moment, but I'm going to go back to YouTube and see what we have here. We've got a class in New England, and they want to know the relationship between squid and sperm whales.
Ooh, great question. So we've heard all those stories, right, of Moby Dick and of, squid, giant squid and sperm whales battling each other, but it's actually really hard to see that happening, right? Because we don't hang out with sperm whales all the time, turns out, or with giant squid because they live really deep. And so scientists were able to gather evidence that squid and sperm whales do compete, and sperm whales do eat squid because they saw these rings, the marks of the suckers on the sperm whale. And they also would find essentially the bony pieces of squid, just their beak, the thing they eat with, in whale poop. And that's how we knew that, in fact, sperm whales do eat squid and they do battle each other.
All right, very cool. They were saying there's lots of legends in the New England area about that relationship. So pretty cool. Okay, Miss Nielsen's crew is hanging out with us. They are just joining via microphone, but if you want to go ahead and unmute, we will grab a question or two from your group.
Okay, Lauren.
Hi. What's the most
Hi.
common type of squid?
What's the most
Common type of squid.
common type of squid? I thought you were going to say delicious type of squid. Um, so there are a few squid that are really common. One is the one I work on, the big fin reef squid. It lives all the way around the world. I don't know where you're calling in from, but in New England, there's another small squid that's quite tubular and pointy. That's quite common. And then in South America and parts of North America on the West Coast, it's a squid called the Humboldt squid, which gets really big. Lots of people fish them. And it's probably one of the ones you might have when you're having, calamari or a squid steak.
Awesome. Do we have time for one more question?
Go for it.
Fraser.
What's the most dangerous cephalopod?
Ooh, the most dangerous. This might be a subjective question, meaning it is not the one that everyone agrees on, but I think might be one of the most dangerous, is something called the blue-ringed octopus. It's a very, very, very small octopus. It lives in the shallows on the beach, but it's really poisonous. It's got a neurotoxin in it. And for the most part, they're not just going around neurotoxining everyone, but if they're really scared or they're really frightened, they might bite. And that's when the toxin will get you.
Thank you.
All right. So that was another class in British Columbia. With it being later in the day, we've got a lot of West Coast classes activated right now, which is pretty cool. And what I'm learning is that there is a wealth of squid questions out there that students were just looking for an opportunity to get to the bottom of some of the squid questions they've been wanting to ask. Okay, well, with the time that we have left, we've got about 5 minutes or so. I'll check in with some of our camera classrooms. I'll check YouTube to see if anything is popping up that I might have missed. If your camera's on, you can wave as well, and that'll tell me I need to come back to your classroom because you have another question. And looks like our Winlaw fourth graders would like to come back in. So let's bring them back in.
My question is, how many squids have you seen at once?
Oh.
Ooh, at once. In the water or at an aquarium?
In the water.
In the water. Okay. Maybe 10? 10 squids at once? My squid don't hang out with each other too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thought there was going to be like.
So do you remember yours? No?
I have one more question.
River, go ahead.
All right, squeeze it in.
How many squids do you think are in the world?
Ooh, like different
Ooh.
kinds. Or
Just
in
like
total?
every single squid. I
Oh,
don't
wow.
care.
Every single one. Okay, this is going to be a guess. And maybe this is something that you should be researching for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I would guess there are millions of squid, millions of them. Now imagine if each one of those was actually an alien.
That's hard to wrap your head around. We'd have been invaded thoroughly, for sure.
They do look like aliens.
They look
All right.
like aliens. Yeah.
Thanks, grade fours. Okay. Cherry Tree class. I think they're still here hanging out with us. 2 questions. They're wondering if you ever nature journal for fun or about your research. And then maybe this is somebody in the marine biologist community. They're wondering if you know John Muir Laws.
I don't know John Muir Laws, but about nature journaling, I certainly did a lot of nature journaling when I was a student. I talked a lot about marine things today and about the ocean, but also about all the different things I wanted to be. And there was a good amount of time where I didn't think I wanted to be a marine scientist. I thought I wanted to study forests. And I did a lot of nature journaling, sitting in the rainforest, looking at plants and bugs and monkeys. And it was great. And I'm pretty sure that nature journal ends with me saying, I have a lot of bug bites. I think I might need to go back to the ocean.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, Emily and Elijah, it looks like you have one more for us.
2 questions. We have 2 questions. Are cephalopods minimizing to come on land or something?
They actually can. Not for a very long time, but for some octopus that live on the shore. So if you've ever been tide pooling and you see like all those rocks that are exposed and sometimes there's pools of water in them, octopus can stay in those. But sometimes they need to move between pools so they can come out and crawl a little bit and then go back in. But they're not, coming off the street and buying a baguette anytime soon.
We have one more question that our mom would like to ask.
No, it's you guys.
What's your favorite cephalopod?
Ooh. Well, I think it's a nautilus. Okay, so I showed a picture, you remember from the beginning, of a cephalopod that didn't look like the other cephalopods because it was in a shell. And those have tons of little arms that are like here, and they're really, really old. They haven't changed since like the time with the dinosaurs. And I think they are my favorite.
All right. Well, thanks, Emily and Elijah, for hanging out with us today. Those were some great questions. Let me see what I have here in the private chat. So John is a scientist who teaches about nature journaling. So yeah, I think he's an artist as well. I looked him up as well quickly on Google.
Oh, great.
Madame Green's class. I'll pop you in here. If you have another question, great. If not, you can just wave too. I think someone's coming. Perfect.
I see many a hand.
Yeah.
Where's Max? Yep.
How important are squids to the ecosystem?
That is a great question. They are really, really important. Lots of things eat squid. Squid eat things. They build little environments, right? They lay their eggs in places. Things eat the eggs. And so that's why it's important that we keep them in a healthy balance. And remember, people are part of the ecosystem too. So we depend on them for food and for jobs and all that fun stuff. And for all the inspirations for our alien movies.
All right, squeeze one more in if you got it.
Of course.
How small can a squid be?
I think one of the tiniest squids is something called a pygmy squid. They grow to like maybe 1 inch. They have a little sticky spot on the top of their head, and they stick to the underside of seagrass. And so we went looking for them once. They were very hard to find. But when you found them, they're just little tiny ones.
All right. Thanks, Madame Green's crew. Great questions. Miss Nielsen, if you want to put your mic on, if you have one more, no pressure. But if you do.
Yeah, we have one more. Lauren?
Perfect.
Hi, have you ever discovered a squid and was able to name it?
I have not. So you can't, you can't name a species after yourself. So there are no Sam Cheng squids out there that I have named. But if anyone out there is listening and you found a new squid, I wouldn't mind. We do have a couple of squids that we haven't described yet. So in science, there's a formal process where you describe a species, you write all about it, you take all these measurements, you write about where they live, and we are still working on those for some of those new squid species that we discovered for the big fin reef squid.
All right, great question.
Cool. Can we do one more?
Sure.
What food do squid eat?
So many different kinds of food. I once saw one eat a crab. That was pretty out of the ordinary. They're pretty crunchy and snappy. They eat fish. They eat other mollusks. So you can, slugs, snails, etc. They eat other squid. A little cannibalistic there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And we can actually see what kind of food they eat by looking at what the contents of their stomach are. So kind of looking at squid vomit or poop.
Okay, we're down to our final question. I'll bring in our grade fours one more time. And then we're going to have to say goodbye for today.
Thanks so much. Go ahead, Saul.
What's the similarities to a squid and an octopus?
Between a squid and octopus, yeah.
Yes. So both of them are cephalopods, so meaning their head is attached to their legs or their arms. But the difference between them is that octopus have 8 arms and squid have 8 arms and 2 what we call tentacular clubs. And they're 2 tentacles with specialized pads at the end with lots more suckers that help them grab stuff. So if you see one out in the wild, squid should have 10 things hanging off of them, and octopus should just have 8.
All right. Very cool.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Sam, we have to start off here with a huge shout out to our classrooms for great questions, hanging out with us, playing Kahoot. That was pretty awesome. I'm going to give them a chance to be a little bit loud, some of the ones who are still here in just a second. But I do want to say, Sam, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your evidence-based work and how it helps with conservation, and being here at the ready for the squid and octopus questions.
Anytime. Thanks for the great questions, guys.
All right, let's pop some classrooms in here who are still hanging out with us. Don't be shy. If you want to get a little bit loud, a big goodbye and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hanging out with our classrooms. Thank you, Sam. And we're going to sign off for today. Thanks, everyone.
Be your best cephalopod.